Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matthew Isdal. I am the Head of Performance at Teeds. We're going to be talking about demystifying attribution in the programmatic area, quite broad, but also a very hot topic and very interesting indeed. So before we begin, I'd like to invite the following panelist, Clementina Piazza, Programmatic Director, EMEA from Integral Ad Science, Oliver Gertz, Managing Director, Interaction, EMEA Mediacom. I think I'll just sit here, so if you guys... Ionut Muntinu, Education Project Manager from the IAB Romania. And Lucia Mastromora, Vice President, Global Head of Agency and Partner Business at Adform. So I think before we kind of kick off, it'd be great to get an introduction from each of you. Talk about your name, introduce yourself, your role, and some of the key focus areas in the industry that you cover. Starting from my left.
Kept order right. So, hi everyone, I'm Clementina Piazza. I'm Programmatic Director for EMEA at Integral Ad Science. What does that actually mean? I work with our platform partners as much as our buyers to ensure that everything that we put to market actually makes sense and is easily accessible.
Hello, Oliver Gertz at Mediacom, Managing Director Digital EMEA. So I work with our markets to develop our product, our solutions, and I also work with some of our global advertisers. And main focus is how do we use programmatic to connect better to consumers.
Well, we'll start with a name. So Ionut is the name. So that's how you pronounce my name. No worries. No worries. It's hard. So I've been working for the last 15 years in the performance marketing industry. I founded an agency, and we work a lot in behind the walled gardens. So that is a lot of my expertise over there, but also with helping human capital actually grow in the digital marketing environment. And I think coming from emerging market like Eastern Europe, like Romania, I can give you some insights on how that goes.
Hi, Lucia Mastromauro. I work at Adform. I look after our portfolio of clients globally that includes global agencies as well as consultancies. My background is Google. I did the same job at Google before for the UK. And before that, I was an advertiser. I was at eBay, and I looked after the EMEA region for interactive marketing.
Excellent. So in terms of kicking off, I think it's first like trying to give a top-line overview on attribution. So it is to very much better understand what's going on, what levers to pull in order to make effective decisions around where to allocate spend and drive better performance. But it does very much often comprise a multitude of different touch points to consider. And in terms of the opinion on what multitude of touch points to consider varies between clients from my experience. Kicking us off, start with Clem. What are the key KPIs that should be considered for attribution in programmatic from your perspective?
So, great question. I don't think we've got an hour or a week. What I mean by that is that, from previous experience, right, there's a lot of technicalities that we end up getting into when attribution comes to the table. And that's probably one of the reasons why attribution, we feel very happy about being in this panel, but we've been talking about attribution for the past probably 10 years, if not more. So the question about KPIs, really, I don't want to give a political question, but simply speaking, it depends. You need, our previous panel made some excellent points around, bringing it back to outcomes. If you want to put it even more pragmatically, any business out there, or whatever size they have an ultimate objective of putting out there a service, a product, pushing something. So anything you put in place, obviously your marketing included, no matter which channels is that you're using, have to be brought back to how much it's contributing to allowing you to sell more of that service or sell more of that product that you're in market for. So, and that's the challenge. The reason why we've been speaking for 10 years around attribution or even more is that, it's quite, even if as a business, you've got quite clear what are your objectives, right? As a business, it's kind of bringing it back to all the activities that you're putting in place to drive more of that. So, which, is another way of saying KPI. So if I know I want to sell more T-shirts, how do I make sure to track, you know, whatever is contributing to make me sell more or is not contributing? How do I bring it back to the activities I've got in place, right, to push that? And that's the challenge, because, you know, and we've seen the downfalls of it. I don't want to go ahead in the whole panel altogether, but yeah, I'll shut up for now. But yeah.
No, I think really what it does is highlight there's a big broad area to talk about, and it is very much true that we do really have 20 minutes and then 10 minutes of questions, so we won't be here for too long. But Jonut, I know that you have something. Some opinions on this.
In a nutshell, I'd say return on ad spend and return on investment. So basically, this is what we're looking when we're looking at attribution. We're looking at what brings value to us. So yes, it's the of course there's a lot of ways to look at this, but I think. Although we're looking at programmatic and that part of programmatic, which is outside Google and Facebook and Amazon, I think that we have Google is helping a lot understand how data-driven attribution modeling works. So is basically is helping the newcomers that we are going to use in a way just to get a specialist for us in later. So I think if we look at the way this changes and data-driven attribution modeling is popularized, more popular and becoming more popular, I think that's that's what we have to look as KPIs. I think KPIs are all over that, but in a nutshell, I think return on ad spend and return on investment.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely safe to say that having that holistic overview of all the data points and having the relevant platform to be able to understand them and kind of interpret them to, you know, drive active decisions is absolutely key. So with that in mind, and now that we've highlighted some of the KPIs to consider, you know, ultimately, what is the best way to directly measure these in programmatic based on your experience? I'm going to kick off with Oliver.
Yeah, so I mean, we are as Mediacom responsible for all of our clients' media investment. And I think we look at it at 3 stages. So the first question is cross-channel, on and offline, short-term and long-term. Usually marketing mix models are the tool that we use. Then within digital, the multi-touch attribution, we know last touch, last click is wrong. So going into data-driven attribution is the right thing to do, with some of the challenges when we talk about walled gardens, I guess later. And then the third layer, and I think that's very interesting in the programmatic context, it's not only about insight, it's about how quickly can we action on that data. And there are some really cool developments now where we can take attributed data and merge it back into the bidding algorithm to optimize media in real time.
Yes, exactly. And I think that bidding algorithm is very much selective based on, we mentioned the word walled gardens, and we will very much come around to that. Lucia, based on your experience and your role over at Adform and, you know, your experience in Google, in terms of actually directly measuring attribution and activating it in programmatic, what's your standpoint there?
I think there are different layers, right? There is the basic layer that you can activate from using one holistic, simple solution. Then there are more complex layers when you start layering in more channels and more tools. If you're only using Google, it's simple, press a button, it's a bit vanilla. It's not going to spit out very complex models for you, but it self-optimizes and drives the spend towards Google, which is, I mean, can't blame them. But having worked on the advertiser side, managing you know, hundreds of millions in budget, I've seen a world where it's very important to optimize to the nth degree, and 1% makes a big difference to your budget. And there are a world of different players out there trying to prove that their activity is the best for the advertiser. But from their point of view and with the KPIs and with the data they're giving you, it is. But I think it's the onus of the advertiser and the agency to make sure that they are really measuring across everybody to see which activity is actually incremental to their activity versus somebody just trying to get their last click or that last impression, or showing up a lot in the process but not necessarily driving the incremental value. So that there are ways to do it technically outside of the walled garden. It takes a little bit of work, but then you move into a more sophisticated setup.
Can I just add one, to Lucia's point? Like, I just wanted to share this experience. I come from DSP world as well. And on a day-to-day basis, I cannot count. I mean, I was there either trading or helping out traders. And I kid you not, and that wasn't long ago. Like 80% of my time was spent, instead of doing, you know, optimization or clever optimization, kind of justifying what, you know, I was bringing to the table in terms of data in a one-dimensional way. So, and even if you tried to say, hey, but are you looking at it in a more holistic way? You know, what are the things, you know, how many DSPs have you got on the plan? How's the spend distributed? You don't have to tell me how much you're spending on other DSPs. Just tell me, you know, if there's one that has the lion's share and what's your attribution model. And those were taboo kind of, it was taboo territory. It was still treated as you're kind of making me waste time here, because we're still, you know, although last touch and first touch and, you know, we can go on, you know, many people do believe that that's not really comprehensive and not useful in the mid or long run. It's still the most adopted way, because it, you know, don't break what's not broken.
If I can offer another example. I've been in a case where a partner would tell us that their activity on a post-click basis was driving over 500% performance. And this is $1 million spend a month, right? So a lot of money. And I inherited that relationship, and I'm like, these guys are cherry picking. They're cherry picking our most engaged users that come back all the time anyhow. So we had to build in a very complex model which measured every impression by user. We had to sync their users with our users to actually be able to see what they were doing and to be able to prove that. And at the end of all the analysis and a lot of work, we saw that they were driving actually minus 90% incremental revenue. So to $1 million that I was spending, maybe 100,000 came back directly correlated to their activity. So it sound when I love attribution is a very kind of something a dear thing to me, I would say. I geek out on it a little bit, but where I'm seeing the industry going is attribution has been simplified, which seems that it's just fine, and you know it self-perpetuates, everything is okay, performance is there. But if you look under the hood, I'm certain that a lot of advertisers' budgets are being wasted because the algorithm's just self-optimizing in a kind of smaller pool rather than truly being able to look at the granular level across all the players that an advertiser is using.
And I think that's a really good point, because from my experience and working with clients as well, there are still many, many people that are adopting that last touch. And I know we are very much talking around that data-driven attribution, being able to take all of the data, make the best informed decisions and look at it to the nth degree. But not everybody does that. And ultimately there are obstacles with advertisers and clients and even in agencies which mean that they can't adopt that sophisticated form of measurement. I know the work that you do in terms of educating and actually from a kind of personnel perspective and growth. What do you think the obstacles are with particular advertisers in terms of why they're not adopting this infrastructure and running more effective measurement?
Thank you for the question. Well, first of all, we have to understand the context I'm coming from. So we're talking of a 100 million euro market a year. We're talking at a programmatic budget of 10 million euros per year, even though it's a 25% growth and 14% growth year over year, which is incredible. It's more than the average of European media budget, but it's a small market. So for this small market, imagine how granular the budgets of the clients is. So there's a lot of clients. So for example, my agency holds 100 clients in portfolio, and we barely spend like 5 million euros per year. So for those clients, which some of them can become the new unicorns like UiPath. So maybe some of you know about UiPath, right? Is one of the unicorns that is coming from Romania. And I'm not saying that all the but I'm not saying that all the Romanian SMBs are going to become UiPath. But I'm just saying that they're very granular, and because this is granular, they can, in a way, it's tough for them first to understand the complexity, and it's not popular. Google and Facebook is popular, and because of the budget that is in a way limited, they can, it's enough. Well, it won't be enough in time, but it's enough for them. So there is a lot of opportunity in growing the people that Google and Facebook is already growing, in understanding how complex all the programmatic world is. So then maybe we can if we help the specialists, maybe we can get them to be more closer to real-time bidding. I'm not talking about the other forms of programmatic, because I don't think that helps. Because if that's direct buying, then it's not helping the granular SMBs.
Yeah. And Oliver, I mean, in terms of your role coming from an agency perspective, you talked about like the DDA, like data-driven attribution. Obviously, there's cost and resource required behind that. What's your interpretation in terms of the adoption of attribution, and what are the common obstacles you've faced in terms of your role with advertisers?
Yeah, I think the advertising industry, we still have a lot of people that have lived in this old world, all about big ideas. And then there's this data-driven world in parallel, and it's much easier to talk about it than to do it. In the end, it's about investment and priority. So are you willing to invest a certain part of your budget into measurement? And then there are some quick wins. So data-driven attribution within the ad-served world is quite easy. The walled gardens have their own solutions, so they're also quite easy. Where it gets harder is if you bring it together, try to build a holistic understanding. But my frustration is that this is not the most sexy part, and a lot of advertisers don't see that they should invest into this. And it's people. It's people using technology. So it's not really a lack of technology. It's much more lack of people and knowledge.
Yeah. And I think that is very much a common theme that's come through already today, is that there's definitely a need and a demand to invest in resource and the people that have the capabilities to basically invest in this skill set so they can do this kind of heavy lifting for clients, especially if they're trying to look at alternatives to in-housing as well. So going ahead, I think I was quite interested. That was a great talk, by the way, on the panel and the future trends. I think if we're looking ahead to 2020, it's definitely going to be a very much interesting year. We're talking about like new markets, new channels in terms of audio, connected TV. How do you envisage this fitting in terms of the overall kind of economy and measurement perspective next year? Do you think it has a part to play? How do you think that will be measured? It's not a very easy question, and it is quite broad, but I'll open that to the floor.
The one thing, to Oliver's point of bringing it back to practical, right, is let's learn from what we've done so far. The question stays the same. If the overall question stayed the same around, hey, how A relates to B, or how A doing something relates to driving more of what my business is in market for. I think a lot of it, without getting into the infrastructures that you need and, the competencies and whatnot, starts from really asking the right questions. Like, you don't have to build a city. You start from, building a building. So start, and it's so important in view of like what's going to happen next year around, privacy, like all that's coming in on that front, because, it's on the advertiser hand. To really, like, as an advertiser, you've got ownership of your kind of, your user base data. And that's becoming, more and more, has become already more and more stringent. So, at all different layers that you're operating in, you are, at the end of the day, the owner of that very important foundational part. And you need to, I don't think that you need to invest in that, whatever, without thinking of the big, massive picture of getting everything that you're investing in, together in one go, right. But, first of all, understanding what you've got at hand. Have you got, a marketing intelligence platform? Yes or no? I hope you do. It's kind of, but anyway. And then, work with in-housing or not. We've seen it's a partnership in most cases. So understanding what you bring to the table as an advertiser, who you're working with is bringing to the table. So from an agency standpoint, in terms of like expertise and knowledge, and leverage all of these to start asking questions. And no question is a stupid question.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud of my Romanian peers, because we have the best internet in the world, right? So it works like that because we're very good early adopters. So I'd say, yeah, we will definitely see a little bit of programmatic out of home on the Romanian streets. I know there are a lot of projects trying to track eye movement and what it means out of home, and I think I think that will happen. I don't know how much of that will happen, I mean, in terms of money and budgets, but definitely it will kick off over there something.
So for 2020, so much to unpack a little bit and bring back to attribution. So Google has done us a big favor, right? They have removed the user ID from their master data, which means is you can put data on them. They can self-optimize for their own purpose, which, I mean, I don't blame them again. But if you're trying to use more than one DSP or something else in combination to DBM, DV360, that piece lives in isolation. Now, for us, AdForm is a full stack buy and sell side. So we have the ad server, we have the DSP sitting on top of the ad server, and we have a DMP in the middle there, which is built in one tag. So for us, what we've been doing with agencies and also working with consultancies to facilitate both from an attribution perspective as well as kind of a bridging that divide that has been created between Google in regards to that walled garden is that we have repurposed our ad server for a light kind of solution where agencies can take just that light solution, we call it advanced tracking. They can piggyback that on DCM. So if they are running other DSPs, they have the attribution data as well as the audience data being bridged from that front. So they can activate their other DSP activity without being blind to what's happening within the both reservation and programmatic bits that are happening on Google. So anybody in the kind of attribution front that has seen this solution has been very excited. It helps our DSP as well, obviously, because our DSP then doesn't optimize itself in a blind way. It also helps businesses that are looking at optimizing their audience not to be kind of fully blind and have everything just live in a walled garden and not be able to optimize who their users and customers are in a more sophisticated way. So for us, it's been a little bit of a blessing in disguise. This has happened in EMEA since GDPR, but Google is extending it globally on January 1st. So everybody in the US is very excited about our solution, which is great. But beyond that piece, I think on the attribution front, where we are really excited is just to be able to be that bridge to help, third parties or the advertisers themselves or the agencies have access to the master data that they need to understand what's happening. If you're not understanding what's happening cross-platform, you're really shooting blind because one might be getting in the way and you're not even tracking that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of independent ad tech because I think you should not let measurement be done by the media vendor. And I think as an industry, we have two tasks. The first one is simplification. And I think because we're so techy, we often get hung up on all the cool stuff we can do, like IAS reports hundreds of metrics. That confuses clients. So I think the main task that we have to do is going back to the key decision makers and be able to explain on one page how do we measure your marketing investment and how can we show you that we're improving your return on investment. Then that should hopefully free up also the willingness to invest into that. And then we come into all these technical, very complex discussions to say what is the best possible way of doing it. And that will be a continuous journey. I'm not so worried about the sophistication of solutions. I'm worried about losing the key marketing decision makers with too much technical jargon and complexity. And we have to always bring it back to the very simple question, what am I getting back for the money I'm investing? If we can answer that question, we get buy-in, and then we can get better and better in digging deeper and getting more precise in answering it.
And that kind of leads me into my closing statement, because all of you kind of touched on your opinions throughout that. Just in the sake of time, I think we'll kind of wrap it up here. But in terms of closing statements, I think if you could give me a brief or more detailed version in terms of what is your interpretation of good attribution and best practice in today's programmatic world. And that is quite broad, and you may choose just to pick on specifics, like the key three things. I'll take it out. Anyone?
Okay. Well, I think the starting point is really simplicity and clarity. So if you have more than 5 KPI to measure your digital, then probably you're not really clear of what you want to achieve. And then you have to use different tools in different level of complexity to answer those questions. But never forget the big picture. And the big picture is most consumer journeys are not 100% digital, and what we see in our digital tools is covering only a very small fraction of advertising effectiveness. So don't get carried away with measuring to the nth degrees on your digital world, if in reality the majority of actions happen in the brain or happen on the high street. So I think that's very important.
if it's 3, then we have to think of multi-channel attribution, like across devices, across digital channels, and online to offline. And I think these are the best 3, let's say, components that we have to look into, because it's definitely important how to measure our the client's ROI and return on every little euro or pound or anything.
Well, obviously, I second what you guys have mentioned. I think to take it a level further, it saddens me a little bit because I don't really hear people talking about incrementality test anymore. And it's a slightly complex one to set up, but if you're spending a lot of money, I would recommend having a look at it and looking at the right KPIs for it, obviously. If you're an e-commerce player, obviously net revenue would be what you're looking for, but if you're a brand, there are many other things. And of course, bringing it all together offline and online as much as you can.
To what you guys have said, I would only add 2 things. One, which is understand your sales cycle. So I think this is a point that I draw actually from Oliver's knowledge, and speaking to him, he made a very valid point around you need to understand how quick or how lengthy is your sales cycle, and on that plays a massive part in how you need to look at attribution. Because if you're selling, your sales cycle is fairly quick, then, we go back into a point, although we don't like, obviously, first touch, last touch, then, is it really worth putting all your efforts in breaking, something that might actually be, quite relevant or not be so misguiding? If your sales process is much lengthier, then that is definitely an area where, it should be kind of imperative for you to bring efforts back into thinking at least about attribution. And the second thing, which is kind of a wish and a consideration together, is to advertisers and in general, don't make it a race to the bottom. Like, return on ad spend is not what's bringing you the result at the cheapest. It's what's bringing you the best, like, midpoint, right? So, and this is going back to kind of previous experience and DSP experiences, the spray and pray approach, or, which fuels the whole last touch rationale. Like, again, that's a race to the bottom. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help publishers. It doesn't help anyone within the ecosystem. So yes, attribute value, but make sure that whatever, your methodology is, depending on what your sales cycle is, you definitely put your head to it and, are inquisitive about it.
And I think it's safe to say on such a complex topic, there's a lot of different forms of opinion and things to measure. But ultimately, it comes down to simplifying what question you are trying to ask as a brand. How are you going to effectively measure that? And what are the right tools to be able to measure that? I think an ongoing kind of theme that's already started today is the requirement to invest in resource and expertise in order to be able to ask the right question and also assess that directly. Slightly conscious of time on there. I think, do we have some time for 1 or 2 questions from the audiences? Or are we running over slightly?
Go for 1 quickly.
Do we have one from anyone in the audience? I don't see any hands. So in which?
Yeah, maybe I can answer to what Clem said. Yeah, I agree. I think once you start measuring what really creates value, you will see that, for example, viewability or brand safety or fraud, that quality, so professionally produced environments that engage users suddenly are looking much more cost effective than if you just look at the low CPMs. So, and I think that is the key learning that we have with many clients. The moment we start measuring harder, we evaluate quality. But quality also is not the brand of the publisher. I think that is a misconception. Quality is the ability of a publisher to draw the right audience and engage them. And then we are seeing that justifies higher investment. So in the end, I don't agree. It's always our job to drive the highest return on investment for the budget. But what we see is that doesn't mean buying the cheapest media.
Perfect, thank you. If we get a round of applause for all the panelists.